I had a goal to make it work, to get out there and be recognized in the industry as a player in the industry. And I just knew that no matter what I did, I wasn't going to give up.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I've got Craig Allmendinger, CEO of Northeast Scientific. Craig, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's Made in America podcast, Craig. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So that's a multi-level question, but I'll try to make it simple. So we basically make healthcare less expensive. And I do it because healthcare's costs are a problem, and I like to fix problems. So in more detail, we take surgical devices that are single use and we make them usable again.
Sort of a bit of a recycling, if you will,
Yes.
for medical devices that tend to be sort of one and done out the door.
Yes.
Well, listen, I mean, you're tackling a huge problem. As I think most people know, I think the medical costs are now about like 20% of GDP. It's like a huge, huge number.
Yep.
So everything we can do bit by bit to help kind of get that under control, I think everybody can sort of get behind. But let's talk a little bit. Let's get into some of the details around how it is you guys do what you do. Because as someone who's had to use medical devices before, I don't know that I want one that went into somebody else going into me. So how do you sort of make that work, but still sort of maintain quality and safety?
Sure. So we're required, we have all the same requirements as the OEM, the original manufacturer of the device. So we have full FDA oversight. We have to go through the whole process of an application. It's called the 510K application. It takes about a year to develop it and then another 6 months to apply with the FDA. We're basically going to the FDA and saying, hey, we've taken this device, we've cleaned it, we've tested it, we've repackaged it and sterilized it, and we've proven that through validations that that device is substantially equivalent to the original device. Now, that's the FDA term, substantially equivalent, but what that means is that it has met all the requirements of the FDA, meaning that there's no soil on it, there's no chance of an infection. There's nothing left on that device after we get done with it, and we know it's going to function correctly too. So it's going to do what it's meant to do.
So what kind of devices do you guys at Northeast Scientific or NES, what kind of devices do you guys work on? I mean, is it just anything? Is it?
No, so we're pretty specialized. We work with interventional catheters right now. So basically anything from the stomach down to the ankle, arterial and venous work. So catheters that are used for diagnostic and also for treatment base. So one is an intravascular ultrasound catheter and another one is an atherectomy catheter, basically a laser atherectomy they use it for clearing the blockages in the arteries in the leg so that you can reduce the incidences of limb loss.
Wow. Well, that sounds really important. Also sounds pretty complicated.
Yeah.
But definitely something that I think is super necessary and just a really, I mean, it's always fascinating to me just in general how much goes on in the world that people just don't even know about, right? I mean, before we sort of got introduced, I didn't even know this was a thing. And now I do. And, you got 80 plus people, at a factory kind of making this stuff happen. So just super cool. So listen, we can certainly get into some of more of the applications. But let's go and talk a little bit about the story because I think the audience is often really interested to understand sort of how these organizations, come to pass.
Sure.
So let's just kind of go back. Let's take the way back machine.
Okay.
Maybe not that way back, but back, and just sort of talk about sort of origin story of NES and how it got off the ground.
Sure. So I was the president of a manufacturing company in South Windsor, and I had read a small article in the Wall Street Journal, literally 4 or 5 lines about a company in Arizona that was reprocessing surgical devices. And I looked at it, I read it, and I thought about it. And a couple hours later, I was at home and I'm thinking about it. I said, man, that seems like a really interesting business. Could be kind of cool. I was the president of the manufacturing company at that time. It was going well, but it wasn't really my passion. I wasn't really enjoying it. So we were making high-end audio equipment, microphones.
Okay.
And so it just really wasn't making me happy. And I didn't feel like I was really contributing. And after reading that article, I said, hey, this looks like a really interesting business. So I talked with my father, retired surgeon, and I said, hey, I think this could really work. If we set up a facility here in Connecticut, maybe we can draw in some customers and build a business here. And he said, okay, I'm happy to, support you. Gave me a little bit of money, not enough to get it all the way. He said, it's going to be up to you to finish. And I learned that was a dangerous move on my part because it's hard to make it work when you run out of money. So, but anyway, built the facility in Waterbury in 2005, started working with surgical centers around Connecticut, collecting orthopedic devices, drill bits, rongers, laryngeal mask airways, things that were used in orthopedic surgeries that didn't require FDA clearance.
And they don't require FDA clearance. Why? Because they're exterior to the body.
Well, they're considered less invasive. So drill bits are obviously, they're drilling into the bone, but they're a lot easier to clean. I mean, the FDA still required a quality system, and regulated quality systems. So we were inspected even back then by the FDA. And so got into it, started doing it. We got our first FDA clearance in 2007 with trocars, which actually provide access into the body for endoscopic and laparoscopic procedures.
It sort of goes. So just to be clear, something that just sort of goes in the body, and then it's like it basically opens up a tunnel that you can then put everything else through.
Yep.
What's it called? Trocar.
A trocar.
Got it.
Yep. And Johnson & Johnson happens to be one of the big manufacturers there. So.
Got it.
Did that for a number of years, struggled still though. There was a good 2 years where I didn't take a paycheck, had no income, raising a family and trying to start the business. And it was a big challenge, but finally got to a point where we were generating some income. We had a couple employees, and that's when I met Dr. Herbal.
What year is this now?
That was 2008.
So you've been at this thing 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
and
just sort of struggling.
2.5 of those years was no income. Yeah.
And what do you I know we got to move forward. I want to move forward, but before we do that, what do you attribute to, well, two things. Why was it so hard to sort of get it to be sort of cash flow positive? What did you see? What were some of the struggles you're running into?
Just acceptance in the market, coverage, sales. With 3 people, we could not get out there and, convince these surgery centers to work with us. We were competing against the one company. Actually, another company had come out of the woodwork while we were doing this. Oh. So it actually created a really competitive market, and they were offering, 30, 40 different devices. We had 3. So going to a surgery center and saying, hey, use us. We'll
for
help you
these
save
3
money.
items.
Yeah, they're going to be like, well, we have a bigger group that's doing it. Why would we want to do that? So it was just a lot of challenges, and never mind the oversight. I mean, the FDA being able to comply with all the requirements, and we could have jumped in and done a bunch of sterilization on open and unused devices, but that was risky because it's still, it's still regulated, and you've got to prove validations, and we couldn't do that. So I didn't take a lot of risk there. I took risk with money, but I didn't take a lot of risk with quality and regulatory because I just didn't want to end up in a position where
that's probably an area in this business not to skimp on.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So what got you, as you're going through that, you got these sort of 5 years, 2.5 years unpaid. What kept you going? Like, do you go, if you think back to that, you got demands of a family.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, what sustained you in those like hard times?
The drive to get it done. Like I set a goal and I hadn't reached that goal. And even today, I still haven't reached my goals, but I'm always striving for new goals. And at that time, I had a goal to make it work, to get out there and be recognized in the industry as a player in the industry. And I just knew that no matter what I did, I wasn't going to give up. And I had people all over the place telling me to stop, give up, it's never going to work. You're never going to get there. And that even drove me more. Because don't tell me I can't do something. And, because they saw the struggle and they realized, look, you could go somewhere else. You can get a job. You could do well. Just move out of this and figure it out. Your family's struggling. It's hard. And I said, yeah, I know, but that's giving up. And I just couldn't give up. So I just kept driving myself, and my wife drove me too. She was struggling too. I mean, trying to raise a child at that time with no money, and we had good families that supported us, but she was really humble and she didn't want to take that money from our families, and so it was her driving me too, saying, you're not going to give up because I've put up with this for a number of years. I expect to
We've come too far not to succeed.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, thank God she did that, because had she been a different person, I might have never gotten to where I am today. So,
Yeah.
you know, it was all of that combined, that myself and my family and my wife driving me to just get it done.
Do you remember like conversations you had? I mean, listen, picking a life partner, you know, is just so important to success in everything,
Yep.
happiness and otherwise. I mean, was she always on board from the beginning? Did you guys have conversations? Like, what was sort of your strategy or the tactics you used to sort of stay together through those tough times?
She was always skeptical of anything I did because she's really smart, and she, you know, she's like, think about it before you jump. And I always would jump before thinking. And
Sure.
so she helped me really keep a cool head with that. And, but skeptical was good. And she was always challenging me. Is it going to work? Do you have the ability to make this happen? Think about it. Think hard about what it means. And if you decide to do it, then I'm going to back you up. And that's exactly what happened.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's great. I could see the joy in in your eyes. That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So we're 5 years in.
5 years
And then what happens?
So at that point, we had an investor beyond my father, a small investor. He put a couple $100,000 in, and he decided that he wanted to move out of it and got cold feet. Didn't want to hang out, didn't see the long haul, didn't see it happening. And I don't blame him. I mean, there was, you know, years there where nothing was happening.
Sure.
So that's when I met Dr. Herbal, my current partner, and he's our CFO as well. But he actually runs the largest vascular group in the country right now. And I met him through my father. They met at a symposium, medical surgical symposium, and they started talking. And my dad had mentioned what I was doing. And Dr. Herbal said, hey, I'd like to talk to your son. I love entrepreneurship. I love opportunity. Let me see what's going on. So we met, we had a couple lunches, and about maybe 6 months later, he said, look, I want to help you. And I said, thank God, because I don't know what I'm going to do. But he said, I've got an idea for the business. And it was a device that he wanted to reprocess because he was using so many of them. He said, I could save so much money if I could get this for half price. And at that time, the device really wasn't ideal for reprocessing. But right then at that time, the manufacturer came out with the new version. And it's still the version that's being used today. So 2008, 2009 is when we really went to town.
The world's falling apart in that, right?
Oh, 2008,
I was going to say, yeah, you're like, you finally get sort of like
Yeah.
critical lift
Exactly.
right as the whole world,
Yeah.
credit markets are freezing up. Oh, wow. That's,
It was crazy.
It must have been nuts. Looks like the runway is ending and all of a sudden you get lift.
Yeah, yep. So he said, hey, let's do it. I said, all right. We spent a lot of time looking at the device, reverse engineering it, getting it ready. So we submitted to the FDA in 2009. And it was late 2009. The FDA came back and said, we're not going to approve this device. I said, what do you mean? We're just applying for a reprocessed device. They said, no, we don't like it. We're never going to give you the clearance. I said, well, you can't say no. You haven't even looked at my documentation, my application. So literally 31 months later, we got the clearance.
Holy moly. 2
sets of lawyers down in Maryland, 6 times meeting with the FDA, being turned down multiple times by the FDA. I mean, talk about struggle. That I was pulling my hair out at that point because, you know.
My gosh, you finally see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, what light maybe turns into, maybe it was an oncoming train.
It's a brick wall and a train, at the same time. I mean, the FDA, how do you get around the FDA? You can't.
Yeah.
So, but I had the right people around me. I had the right support. I had lawyers that believed in me. And I also had Dr. Herbal that was helping finance this. So I couldn't have done it without him. And without that, we couldn't have hired the lawyers. We couldn't have gone down to the FDA multiple times. And the reason why the FDA said they weren't going to clear it is because it was the first device that was an active treatment-based device that was being reprocessed.
An active treatment-based device.
So basically, it was a radio frequency catheter that goes into the veins in the leg and ablates the saphenous vein, basically destroys the saphenous vein to remove varicosities. You see people with the
varicose veins.
Varicose veins, right. So what this does is it goes in and it heats up to about 250 degrees C, and it burns that saphenous vein, eliminates the saphenous vein, which actually contributes to varicosities in the leg, and basically eliminates the problem. And he was doing 10, 12 a day of these procedures. And
a day.
He could, and today he still does 7, 8 a day. And it's really a very popular procedure, and it's important because it's stopping other venous diseases from occurring. So it's really an important device.
And that device stays in the body?
No, it goes in. They basically do a cut down in the leg, and they'll insert this into the vein, up into the saphenous vein, and then they burn the vein, literally burn it.
So then what replaces it?
Nothing. Your body can survive without the saphenous vein.
Okay.
I know
this is the question I'm trying to get the answer to. What's the end game? And it's just no more of saphenous vein.
Exactly. Get rid of the vein, you get rid of the disease. Really, that's really the answer.
Really?
Yeah.
So then it comes back out.
So you put
the thing in, burn
it's
it
about
up.
a 10, 15-minute procedure.
Really?
Yeah. The device costs $700, $800 at that time. $800, $900, maybe even $900. And the doctors
You're throwing it away every time.
They're pulling it out, throwing it in the garbage, and their doctors are getting paid maybe $2,000 to do the procedure.
Right.
They've got nurses in the room.
Yeah, anesthesia, the room.
No anesthesia, just local anesthesia, but nurses, the room, the equipment, all that. I mean, not a lot of money to be made. So, the doctors said, hey, Dr. Herbal said, this is a device. This is what we need to reprocess.
And so prior to this point, all the reprocessed devices, well, I guess I just want to make sure I follow the difference. So what were other devices prior to this?
So none of them were active. So none of them were actually treatment-based. So this is an active, what the FDA calls active. It's putting energy in the body.
Isn't the drill active, though? Because you mentioned
It's
about
heat.
refurbing drills.
Well, no, drill bits, it's considered active, but it's not in an artery or in a vein.
I gotcha.
So it's basically open procedure. They're going right in. They're drilling into the bone.
And then bang, okay.
Yeah.
This one's sort of in more.
Yeah, not as dangerous,
Got
I
it.
guess. But you're in flowing blood.
And just order of magnitude, once you, on a refurb, if the brand new device is $900 at the time, what would it be? What would it cost to sort of
About $400.
So half price.
Yep, half price.
And how many times can you refurb it?
At that time, we could do it once. Today, we can do it 4 times.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, it took a lot of work to convince the FDA it could be done more than once, because it took you a hard time to prove them once. Then I proved them again that, we could do it more than once. So
it took you almost, so once you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you see this idea of like, hey, we could find it. I mean, ultimately, what is this, right? It's a niche in the market, right?
Yes.
You find a spot in the market that actually adds a ton of value, we just discussed, and a place you can actually do it. But then it takes you 31 months after that point to even get it approved.
Yep. And that's when most of the people came out of the woodwork and said, just give it up. They said, you're never going to get this. I had doctors, I had FDA consultants, I had family, I had friends. Just give up. Just don't, you've been at it for too long. You're never going to get it.
How many rejections before they finally?
We had 2 different times where the FDA said, we're not going to clear this. So it's called an NSE, not substantially equivalent.
And then how did you?
I went back and I said, I'm resubmitting. And they said, well, you're going to get the same thing. And I did it, but I did it and I kept going. I didn't stop. And finally, sitting with the FDA, they had 15 representatives of the FDA in Maryland at this big conference table. I had me and 2 sets of lawyers. And I said, what are we going to do? And the FDA said, well, you can either threaten us with a lawsuit or you can let us review it one more time and we'll see what happens. And I started arguing and he said, do you want to argue or do you want to leave? And we'll see what happens. And I think I made the right decision and said, I'll shut my mouth and leave.
Yeah, exactly.
So a month later, we had the clearance.
So what changed in submission 3?
I think we just kept providing them with data that proved that it was substantially equivalent. We proved that there was no risk. We proved that it was done right. You know, no one had applied for an active device like this with the FDA. And so they were like stunned, like, why would anybody want to reprocess this? You know, why don't you stick to the orthopedic stuff? Why don't you stick to this? And I didn't want to stick to the normal stuff. So it finally was at a point where, you know, I think they realized that we provided more than enough data to convince them that it was safe and effective.
But do you feel like so there was substantially different information provided? It wasn't like you just kept saying the same thing 3 times over.
No, that's right.
You did more.
Yeah, we did more, but only up until about the last 12 months, because they made us do an animal study.
Really?
And you know, why are we doing an animal study? What good is that going to prove? So yeah, we did the animal study. Then they wouldn't accept the animal study results.
Why, wrong animal? Or what?
No, we did a pig. We actually did pigs because they're the only quadrupedal that has a saphenous vein, by the way.
So you're limited.
Yeah.
Limited.
Right. So yeah, we did that. Actually, sheep was really the answer. We did a pig and then we did sheep, but it was all an animal study that they never accepted. So yeah, and it just took a lot of effort and drive, and I just wasn't going to give up, and I think the FDA knew that. So after the 12 months, 24 months of submitting data, and then 12 months of arguing, finally got to the point where I think they saw the light.
Sort of like the ultimate definition of persistence beats resistance. Like if you just stay at it long enough. So what was the date that you got the approval? Do you remember?
It was 11/11. 2000, no, it was 10/11/12. So it was something like
10, 11,
it was like
12.
a weird date, but it was the 11th day in December. So 11, something like that. Yeah, it was crazy.
You remember that? What did it feel like when that came through?
I cried.
Did you? I mean, was it sort of you get an email or a letter in the mail?
I got a letter.
Like a college acceptance letter kind of a thing?
It was an email, and it was a PDF. And so I printed it out and I read it, and it was like 8 pages, because each time the FDA said, this is why we're rejecting, you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right, the head of the division was answering it and saying, I believe that you did do this correctly. I do believe that you did this correctly. So I read the whole thing, 8 pages, and I'm going, where is this going to lead to?
Each page you're getting more excited.
I'm like, holy crap. And then finally I get to the last page and it says, we're going to overturn the NSE, not substantially equivalent, and we're going to give you the clearance. I cried.
Oh, yeah.
I was crying, and I called Dr. Herbal, and I'm crying on the phone with him, and he's crying, and he's like, unbelievable. I can't believe you did it. He said, he knew though that I would get there. So he was the one that believed in me, along with my family, you know, my wife and everything. But it was an amazing day. Yeah. It was at night too. It wasn't until I didn't get the PDF until like 9 at night, and I printed it out at home, and I'm freaking out. So yeah, it was really
Man, you
cool.
got some patience. I would have just turned to the last page of that PDF. Just go right to the end. You know, I'll read the beginning later and just tell me what the answer is.
I handed it off to my son and I said, "Can you read this too?" Just to
make sure
that I read it correctly. And he goes, I think you read it right, Dad. I'm like, all right. So
wow.
Yeah, it was a really big day.
That's amazing. Yeah. And how long after you get that huge victory?
Yeah.
How long before you kind of, because that's sort of the end of the beginning almost in a weird way, right? Because it's not like, oh, now you've got it, and boy, we've got a whole warehouse full of these things, and tomorrow we're just going to start seeing the cash flowing in.
Right.
Now we've got to actually, you know, get sales and produce, and you've got to actually, it's not just produce, you actually have to get the first use items, which there's probably not even a collection system in place to get these, because no one's been doing it.
Exactly.
So how do you go? So like all of a sudden I was with you on the excitement. Now all of a sudden you like the next morning wake up and realize, now I got to start climbing the actual mountain.
Yeah. It was a little scary, but the elation outweighed the fear, because I knew
wind at your back. Yeah.
I'm going to figure it out. But we ended up getting a big distributor came in, a publicly traded company, Vascular Solutions, came in and said, hey, we want to carry your product. And so they've got a sales force of 100 reps.
Boom.
All we have to do is reprocess. Just get those devices, make them sterile, make them good, ship them to our location in Minnesota, and we'll take care of the rest. So it was a huge weight off my shoulders, because they jumped in right away. I mean, they were waiting for us.
You had been building that relationship?
No,
or?
Dr. Herbal had known them and was talking with them, But they had said, if you ever do get this, we're going to talk. And sure enough, within days of the clearance, I got a call from the CEO, and he says, "We're doing this." And I said, "All right,
Let's go.
let's go."
So so now I mean, how do you actually get the used, is it a catheter? Is that what it is?
Catheter, yeah.
How do you get the used catheter to be able to reprocess it? Like how does that work?
So you go to the physician and you say, "Hey, look, we're gonna give you this device, basically brand new again, and we're gonna charge you half the price. Do you want to ship it to us to do that?"
Hell yeah.
And they say, "Hell yeah."
So
Yeah.
so is there any particular, in order for the clearance, do you need any particular procedure to save it after the use, or it just doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I mean,
Just throw
there's
it in a bag
definitely
or-
steps that have to be taken. They have to wipe it down. They have to
Okay.
flush it. But those are all things that we developed in the application with the FDA
I got
to
it.
say, "Hey, we're going to do A through Z in order to get that device back here and reprocess it."
But how can you actually, not to put a too fine a point on this, but how can you validate that they did the thing they needed to do?
You can't. You
Okay.
can't, but that's why you do worst case scenarios when
Oh,
you
got
do
it.
validations for the FDA. So we act like nothing was done.
I got
And then we do artificial soiling, we do simulated use.
Got
I
it.
mean, it's extensive. We
Okay.
we do a lot of testing, and it's all under worst case scenarios.
And then do you typically, is sort of the deal, hey, Dr., John Doe, whatever, Jane Doe, do you give me your things back and I'll sell them back to you?
Yep.
Or you could sell them to anybody?
At that time, it was back to you.
Okay.
And that seemed to be what the consensus was. The doctors wanted their own devices back. And I knew at that time too, the other competitors, not really competitors, but other reprocessors were in that same boat where the hospitals or the physicians wanted their own devices back. But it didn't really make any sense because they're all being treated the same way.
Exactly.
So what, that your patient's blood was on it, so it makes it better? And it didn't really make a lot of sense. So, but for years, it was sort of, we had a lot of doctors that wanted their own devices back. Today, they don't care. They just want them back. And
Right.
so we're getting them in droves coming into the facility. We're cleaning them, testing them, sterilizing them, and then getting them back out to whoever will buy them.
Got it. Yeah, the only so it makes sense, right? It's not like a blood donation where you could, like, I don't know, many people may know, but if you're planning to have surgery, you can actually donate your own blood to
Right.
yourself.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it's not even like the same patient would get the same use again. So who cares
Exactly.
once you're going?
Yeah.
But the one other thing I was thinking about was I wanted to make sure there was enough supply, meaning I don't want to send you all of my used devices back, but then when I go to buy them, you're out of stock. That's not an issue?
Well, it is. It is. It's always a challenge finding enough devices because they can't all make it through the process. So,
Oh, is that right?
oh yeah, they fail in testing. They fail in.
Oh,
you
that
know,
makes sense. Something happened in transit or
Yeah.
or something,
yeah,
yeah,
it gets
got
broken. Even the doctor or the nurse puts it in a box. It gets broken. The handle gets cracked. The sheath gets kinked. There's a multitude of things that can happen.
Yeah. So okay. So what do you? So inventory is a challenge.
Inventory is always a challenge. Yeah, we're always looking for supply, and we're out there. There's doctors that don't reprocess. There's hospitals that don't reprocess. So we go to them and we buy that soiled inventory from them at a low price, but we still buy it. And
well,
then
they're throwing it away. So
I know, right?
Right.
So we buy it and we bring it into the facility. We do the same thing.
So some places don't buy into this.
That's correct. Yeah, there are some. The top 10 hospitals in the world all reprocess, though.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah.
yeah.
Why wouldn't you reprocess?
It does. It really doesn't make sense to not do it. I mean, hospitals are struggling, private practices are struggling. Healthcare is ridiculously expensive. The overhead is ridiculous. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be reprocessing.
And does everyone agree to do it up to the 4 times that you said you
No,
can do?
there's some doctors that feel like, well, we're going to just do the first cycle,
Okay.
which doesn't really make sense either. But
If it's validated, right?
doctors are picky, and that's just the way it is.
Doctors are people. People
Yeah,
are picky.
that's right.
So you have to. So now the sort of the complexity adds to, you've got to collect them.
Mhm.
You've got to know because I got to imagine the same hospital or surgical center will use some mix of new,
Yep.
first time reuse, second time reuse, third
Correct.
time reuse, fourth time reuse.
Yep.
So use a lot of extra complexity now that you got to figure out. I got to get them.
Yep.
I got to make sure I know what number reuse it is.
Yep. We mark every device.
You mark
Yep.
it on the device itself
the
on
device.
the first time out. So
Yep.
so you don't rely on them putting it in the right bag.
No,
There's some way you get the device back, you'll know.
we know it's our device. We see our mark on it. We see a second, a third mark. And on that third mark, we know
This
it
is
comes
it.
back with a third mark, throw it out. That means it's been used 4 times.
Aha.
Yeah.
And are other people doing this? Like, are you, when you mentioned your mark, is there sort of a standard marking?
No. There's, like I said, there's only about 8 companies in the world that are actually reprocessing invasive devices. So we each have our unique way of identifying a reprocessed device. Some put a tag on it, some engrave it. We do like an engraving,
Got it.
very small engraving.
So do you check for other markings?
Oh yeah, if we see a marking, we throw it out.
Really?
Yeah, because we don't want to reprocess someone else's reprocessed device because we don't know what they did with it. We can only control what we've done with our devices. So we're very cautious.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's sort of complicated.
It is very complicated.
More
It
than
got
you would, more than you would sort of think. It just seems like as you've added more value, it just has increased the complexity level.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then even more today is we're doing even more complex devices now. So we're doing intravascular ultrasound. We're doing atherectomy. I mean, these are very complex catheters that are very expensive, and they take a lot of handling, a lot of touch, and a lot of care to get them through the process correctly so that we can get them back to the physician.
So how many more FDA clearances have you had to get
We
to
have
do
about
all that?
7 FDA clearances now.
Wow. Did they all have to go through the same level of?
They didn't all take 30 months. Some of them have taken a year. Some of them taken a little more than a year. Some of them less than a year. It just really depends. But we are dealing with the FDA's cardiovascular division. So it's always the same group that we're dealing with. And we've built up, I can't say a relationship, but they know who we are. We know who they are. And we sort of know what they expect now. Every once in a while, they throw a curveball and want a new test, a new something that they throw into the mix, which extends our application process. But, that's good. It's okay for that. Because,
sort of like every relationship or business relationship, it sort of develops over time. You get to know each other.
Right.
You sort of anticipate what they expect. And every once in a while, someone new gets there. They come up with something new. And it sounds like a similar type of relationship.
Yeah. And the FDA is always trying to raise the bar, which I'm okay with because there are risks there. There are risks if it's not done right. If you're not operating under the right quality system and you're not really focused on quality, it can be dangerous. But, you've got to do it right. And that takes money, it takes time, and it takes effort. And I think that's why there's not that many of us out there, because it really does take a commitment that you don't see very often.
It's really quite amazing. And it sort of feels like you guys blazed the trail for this sort of invasive rebuild, like first one out the gate. It's rare that the pioneers survive, but you have and thrived.
Right.
And it sounds like other people are sort of coming behind to do more stuff.
Yep.
How do you sort of continue to make yourself relevant and unique and viable in an environment in a copycat world?
Yeah, I think it's, quality, it's dedication to the customer, it's dedicated to the trade. I mean, we're constantly trying to improve what we do all the time. I mean, can we get better equipment? Can we do a better process? Can we improve, can we get more more yield from a device? Can we add more cycles? How can we make it better for the physicians? And how can we make it better for healthcare in general? So yeah, we do call ourselves pioneers in our niche. I mean, look, I didn't invent reprocessing. Like I said, I read a small article about it, and I copied what was out there.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I did pioneer, the approach in the catheter base, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and there's a lot of expense there that I think we can help reduce to make these procedures more affordable, and I think get more procedures out there, so more people treated. But it's all about delivering quality and finding unique devices out there, finding new devices that are taxing the system. These doctors are always changing their approach. They always want to advance and be better and do better. And that means more devices, more complex devices. So we have to adapt and we have to shift with that and be able to change how we do things so that we can accomplish more devices, new devices, more complex devices. So it's a constantly changing industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, listen, as long as there's constant change, there'll be an opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I assume you take a paycheck now.
I do.
That's good. That's good.
Yes.
You know, it would be a long time without
Yeah,
that.
that would be long.
So-
We're almost 20 years now.
Well, yeah. So I imagine your role in day to day has changed a lot since those early days.
Yes.
What do you spend your time doing, Craig? What do you?
So I'm always researching the industry. I read white papers every day. White papers are basically, physician developed reviews of devices and procedures, and so I'm constantly trying to keep on top of the industry, on top of procedures. What's going on in the world? Even what are they doing in Africa? What are they doing in Europe? What are they doing in the United States? I mean, the U.S. is the biggest market, so I'm always really focused on that. But and then I'm driving my team. I'm driving them to continue to excel at what they do. I mean, I'm there every day. My wife wishes I wasn't, but I am. I'm there every day, and I'm in it. I'm in meetings every day. I'm in production meetings. I'm in validation meetings. I'm in planning meetings. I don't want to just sit in my office and do nothing. I'll go crazy. I want to be a part of what's happening every day. So I'm there. Whatever they need me to do, I'm there. And I mean, I participate in validations. I'll stand in the soiled room and watch them cover the devices in artificial blood and actuate them through simulated arteries. And, I've done it myself. I love it. It's just awesome. I love to be able to be a part of it. So it's just an everyday thing for me. I'm never slowing down.
You haven't. You definitely have not lost the passion.
No.
You got through the fight. Some people kind of like lose it once they get the victory. It does not seem to be you.
No, I have more victories to go after. So.
So, Craig, one more thing before we wrap it up. I know you've got something going called the Pacemaker Project, I think.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about it?
Sure. So it's we've got a nonprofit called World Pace, but that's just one small piece of it. What we do is we actually, with the help of University of Michigan and a number of physicians out there, we actually collect pacemakers from deceased families, from changeouts that happen in hospitals. Most of them are donated from the families. They come into the University of Michigan, they come into NES, and we actually reprocess them and we give them away. So we basically take a device that can be anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000, and we give it away so that it can be implanted in patients that can't afford it. And we do that all over the world. We're in Africa, we're in South America, we're in Haiti, we're in Argentina, we're in I think it's about 15 countries now that we ship them to. But it's all with the help of the physicians that we do this, because these doctors take our pacemakers that are reprocessed and they fly to Africa and they do the implants for free.
Get out of here.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Wow.
I've been to Africa. I've been to Haiti. I've actually assisted in implants. I've been at the table, gloves on, masked up.
Get out of here.
Yep, I've helped the doctor in the implants. Yeah.
Look at you,
Yeah.
like literally hands-on making
Hands-on.
a difference.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned all, but there's other countries. You guys do this in the U.S.?
No, it is not allowed in the U.S. at this point. It's a Class 3 device. There are no reprocessed Class 3 devices right now in the U.S. Because it's an implant. I think there is a time when it will become, so that we can lower the cost of healthcare there. I mean, $10,000 to $30,000 for a pacemaker. It's ridiculous. And it's really less complicated than a cell phone.
Really?
Yeah. So why is it so expensive?
That's
Crazy. And the fact is, these companies don't want to give them for free. They don't. They really don't. So we're constantly, every month we're probably doing between 40 and 100 devices every month, and we're cleaning them. First we clean them, and then we send them to the University of Michigan. University of Michigan tests them and does some extra additional work to them. They send them back to us. We package them and sterilize them, and then we ship them back to either Michigan or to physicians that need them anywhere in the world.
No kidding. And how did this all get started? I mean, this seems like a massive project. It's got a lot of different people integrated. How did this get off the ground?
So because the University of Michigan started the project, it's called My Heart, Your Heart. They started the project. My dad's an alumni from the University of Michigan and the Michigan Medical School. So they actually reached out and said, hey, we heard about this company, Northeast Scientific, is reprocessing. We know your dad. Would you guys be interested in helping us be able to get pacemakers out to the world? And I said, absolutely. I jumped on it in a second. I didn't even think about it. I just said, yeah.
Yes, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And today, I mean, we've been at it for, I think, 9 years now, and hundreds of devices have been implanted, and we just continue to go strong. And
It's amazing.
the
So it's
more we can
hundreds of
do-
lives that are really impacted, for the massively for the positive by being able to get these pacemakers, and that they would have never been able to get without.
That's right. They would never get it, and they'd probably end up dead. So the first one we did was in Haiti. A young girl, 9 years old. When she was born, she had a heart problem. Big company put the pacemaker in at her birth, and the battery ran out 7 years later. And so they called the company, and the company said, no, we're not going to give you a new pacemaker. And that was it. They dropped the patient. They said, we're not going to give you one. That's when I got the phone call and said, hey, we've got this girl in Haiti, and she can't move. She's laying on her couch. She's got no heartbeat. She can't even function as a normal person. And the doctor said, if you can get me a pacemaker, I'll put it in her. And I went to University of Michigan. We figured it out. I flew to Haiti. We put that pacemaker in her the next day. And within 2 days, she was up playing like a normal 9-year-old. It was amazing.
Wow, that's an amazing story, Craig.
Yeah.
Talk about making such a huge impact. That's
I love giving back with it. It's the one thing that it just puts a huge smile on my face every day, because it's literally every day I hear about it. I'm involved in it in some way or another. It's a group in England. It's a group in Germany. It's somewhere that wants the pacemaker, and we're like, let's do it. Let's
get it done.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's awesome, Craig.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Listen, it's been awesome having you on. It's been a really, really cool story. I'm going to ask you some wrap-up questions, and we'll put it to bed.
Okay.
Ready? If you had to do something, Craig, other than be the CEO of NES, it could be anything in the whole wide world, what would you do to pass your time?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess I'd spend most of it outside doing something, windsurfing, mountain biking, skiing. If I could do that and be able to do everything else that I do, then yeah, I would spend it outside doing crazy stuff like that. I love adventure. I love challenge, and have done it my whole life. So skiing, surfing, that would be it.
That'd be it.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you have a favorite business book?
No, I don't. I read fiction. I read a lot of fiction. I don't really read nonfiction.
White papers and then fiction.
White papers and fiction. Yeah. Yeah. There's no one book out there. I've read a number of them, but no, there isn't any one that I can think of. One book that always I've been back to is called Heart Attack, and it's about the gentleman that picked up our distribution, the CEO of VSI, and the FDA went after him, the Department of Justice went after him, and he never did anything wrong. And he writes this whole book about the fight, and it makes me think. I mean, my fight was nothing compared to what he went through, but that story resonates with me because he didn't give up either. He challenged the system.
On going.
Yeah.
What's something, Craig, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
I think never give up. I think no matter what happens, don't give up. It's always going to get better. It's always they'll be bad, they'll be good. But I think all in all, it's always good. If you put the effort in and you try really hard, you're going to get out of it what you need. And that was instilled in me as a little kid from my dad and my family. And I just think it's true. If you don't give up, you're going to get what you want.
I couldn't agree more. What's something, Craig, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back and tell young Craig, and if he'd listened to you, you'd think it'd make a real positive impact on his life?
I think it would probably be careful of who you work with. Be careful of people in general. I was always very accepting and very open, and unfortunately, I can't be always open and accepting of everybody because there's bad people out there, and there's, and I guess I didn't ever realize that. I always felt like everybody was sort of in it for good, and I've learned that that's just not the truth. And I think if I could tell myself that, I think things would definitely be a little different. I think I'd still be where I am today, but I think I might have gotten there differently, maybe with a little easier path. I think that just don't trust everybody. You've got to really figure out who they are before you really start working with them. And I didn't realize that when I was younger.
Man, that's awesome. Craig, I really, really appreciate you sharing all your views and coming on. We wish you the absolute best of luck.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.